The death toll from Russian missile strike on a tower block in Dnipro city has risen to 25 people. Volodymyr Zelensky wrote on social media. It is a morning, day here in Ukraine and a very bad afternoon, but UATV is here for you, as always, explaining complex things in simple terms. Yesterday's attack on the apartment block in south-central Ukrainian Dnipro city destroyed dozens of flats, leaving between 100 and 200 people homeless. Earlier, reports placed that the death toll at least was 14 people dead. On Sunday, the head of Dnipropetrovsk military region administration, Valentin Reznichenko, informs that at least 20 had died and the fate of 40 people remains unknown.
Рани середнього ступеню.
Wounds of medium degree, mainly shrapnel wounds of the face, neck, limbs, everything is treated. A child, a 9-year-old girl, came to our department with severe injuries, with a minor explosive injury, a brain concussion, a very severe fracture of 2 hips, and shrapnel injury to the right lower leg.
У них квартира зависла.
My relatives' apartment was frozen. They miraculously remained intact in the department. God bless, that's what they call it. Then they were got down with a ladder from the balcony, and now we have 2 cats here. The guys couldn't find them. We came to find out if they can be.
The civilized world reacts to this terrorist attack.
Horrifying. My thoughts are with those suffering and with those working so hard to help. More security assistance is coming to help Ukraine defend itself. Bridget Brink, Ambassador of United States of America in Ukraine.
Russia also reacts in its usual Russian way. The text by Russian Telegram app user Julia Vitezeva says, literally, "I will tell you the horrible thing. They, Ukrainians, have downed the missile intentionally over a living block in Dnipro city, so the world would pity them again and give them not just tanks and anti-aircraft defense systems and money, but also the Miss Universe title for a Ukrainian. I'm serious." Oh, we know you are serious, Julia. You Russians are dead serious when it comes to destroying everything that you just can't build by yourself. Your economics is all raw materials and oil sustained, but you seriously think you are the mighty empire that the world should fear and bow to, while in fact you're nothing but a 140 million nation whose Tsar has started the unjust warfare, but in your main part you still believe it is holy and sacrosanct. Well, Russians really can easily believe that a Ukrainian army could down a missile on their own people because Putin did the same to Russians before. This is Guryanova Street in Moscow, September 1999. And it has, as many international experts believe, been done by Russian Secret Service in order to instigate the First Chechen War. So why not to expect that this is the same story in Dnipro city done by Ukrainians? You see, Russians just got used to the fact that their own political power can kill them anytime for any reason. This is why the fact that the Ukrainian army has downed a missile on its own living people so Ukraine gets a Miss Universe title is somewhat believable by Russians. I mean, why not? Putin would do that, so why not Zelensky? While Russians might believe what they want to, the rescue workers of the State Emergency Service have pulled a woman out from under the rubble of a house destroyed by a Russian missile in Dnipro city. Her voice was heard at night, but they were able to pull her out only around 11:30, Denis Monastyrsky, Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, reported. According to the minister, the victim spent about 10 hours under the rubble after she was heard. Confirmed death toll at this very moment is 25 people dead. And, unfortunately, counting. Will Putin's Russia disappear or not is not a question and is only a matter of time. The question is how, when, and what Putin's Russia collapse will cost to a civilized world. We have asked the question to someone who should know the answer. Power Talks is our new rubric where Ukrainian officials of different rank talk to us in an attempt to explain complex things in simple terms here on UATV channel.
My name is Oleg Dunda, and I am People's Deputy for the Servant of the People Party. We are now meeting near the Verkhovna Rada, right after the next military session of the Ukrainian parliament. What I do, including at the international level, is working on the state's international policy, explaining to our Western partners what they have actually faced. In addition, we are dealing with issues of domestic politics. This is a question of Russian Secret Service agents who infiltrated Ukraine. For 30 years, they have flooded our political life in Ukraine. We should not hide this. We must admit it.
Do you mean Ukraine was flooded with Russian Secret Service agents of influence?
Of course, this applies to the political class, applies to the level of government. They were present everywhere. They worked out the policy that Russia required. And they are to this very day, unfortunately, are doing that. We are doing our best to, first of all, purify, not society as the society is clean, but to purify the highest political and administrative elite of the country, of their influence.
Talking about international policy and the need to convince the collective West in something, international political rumors have it for quite some time that not just the fall of the Putin's regime, but the collapse of the Russian Federation as such is inevitable. Do you think that is the case? And is it desirable for Ukraine and for the world? What the world should be expecting from such a scenario?
This is firstly inevitable, as you said, and secondly it is desirable. That is, things like that has already happened in the world once, and we could make some use of political analogies, examples on how it happened. What we see now is the agony of the outdated Soviet Russian Empire. That is, the Soviets crumbled, already starting from 100 years ago, and the half-life period point occurred to fall on the 91st year. Unfortunately, at that time those elites, I mean Western elites in the first place, not Ukrainian, Kazakh, but Western, they did not reflect it all right and did not understand what was going on. And what is happening now are the consequences of that short-sighted policy, and that is what we are trying to explain to our partners, what conclusions they should draw from these mistakes so as to take sure it won't happen again. The threat of nuclear weapons use that exists today from Moscow, these are the consequences, not worked out programs of the polarization of the Soviet Union. In fact, the world has gathered all the Soviet nuclear weapons, and it was all handed to one person, who today turned out to a nuclear blackmailer of the whole world. What needed to be done back then is for the world to implement a program of the complete destruction of nuclear weapons on all the post-Soviet space.
And that would have saved Russia from the Putin's regime.
Absolutely, because Putin's regime having nuclear weapons is blackmailing not only the Western world, but also its own society. That is, if these weapons did not exist, then the approach to the elimination of this regime would be completely different. Moreover, the Putin regime would not allow itself that external expansion that is now producing, which directly affects the internal elites and the whole of the society in Russia. Therefore, this is partly the fault of the Western world, which did not do this back then. Now the world, together with Ukraine, must decide how and what should be done to ensure that the collapse of Russia, the inevitable collapse of the Soviet Russian Empire, occurs during to a peaceful scenario, so that there would be no civil fratricidal regional war with flows of blood, with incomprehensible, uncontrolled regimes and so on. What needs to be done for this?
What, namely?
Well, first of all, already now we need to be looking for future regional leaders, to find them, to establish relationships, to establish assistance and to ensure them that the West, through Ukraine's medians, among other things, is ready to support them. If they fulfill several conditions, the world will support them in the exercise of their independence and sovereignty, exactly the way it happened to Ukraine. We say to them, we are ready to sit you as a recognized member of the UN member state at a common table to negotiate with you, recognize you in general on simple conditions. You hand over the nuclear weapons located on your territory. You hand over war criminals who participated in this war and collaborators. And you, at the expense of export earnings, in the next, say, 10 years, give part of 15 to 20% in favor of the state as responsibility in the form of reparations and compensation for this criminal warfare. For this, you get your statehood. We recognize you internationally and establish diplomatic relations with you.
Sounds like a Marshall Plan of some sort.
To some extent, yes. That is the other way around. We are promoting you to the WTO and so on.
With that, you mean new government of New Russia?
No, this is the new government of Tatarstan. This is the new government of Bashkortostan. This is the new government of the Urals. Look, you need to understand and realize that it is impossible to create a new government that would keep this Russian empire together as a single whole. It is impossible. It is a priori impossible for several reasons. The first reason is that Putin has completely cleared out the political field around him in 25 years. There is no political competition. That is, there are no ways of transfer of political power available. Power continuity is absent as such. That is, after his demise and fall of his reign, his tyranny and turmoil will begin. Cause there simply are no clear principles of how the transfer of power can happen. That is, there will be a war of all against all. The second reason for Russia's collapse is that Putin's Russia has gone to a very dangerous extreme. I mean the principles by which it acted in Africa or in Syria, through criminalized military gangs. These gangs are now pulled into Russia's political body. What does it mean? I mean that in nowadays Russia is not the law or some state body that is legit, but the one who has more bayonets. Here, for example, Prigozhin, his private military company Wagner has, say, 300,000 men. So he already allows him to claim certain regions of Russia: Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk. No governors of these regions are politically visible anymore. It's Prigozhin who begins to impose tribute, to influence personal policy on all levels and so on. In fact, this is the criminalization of Russia's internal space, and this leads to the imminent disintegration of its very social fabric. This leads to a future regional war.
Understood. And what exactly the collective West should be doing? Expecting the inevitable collapse of Russia, be preparing now and looking for the new government's representatives as a new power carrier.
Yes. Moreover, these representatives of such new governments exist inside Putin's regional power system itself. There are the levels of deputy governors, mayors. For example, Urals. It can be Evgeny Roizman. Why not? A respected individual whom the entire Urals region listens for. And what is that new order of things be of benefit to the West? What we have been shouting about for a long time. Russia is using raw materials, energy raw materials as a weapon, as a means of political pressure. The events of the past year have confirmed this absolutely. To whom, for example, Germany is now turning for support and new contracts on oil supply. Baku, Azerbaijan, and let's just imagine that the USSR did not collapse. What kind of Baku could we talk about after all then? If today's Russia splits up into these parts, each supported by the West when it will solve the issue of its well-being for decades to come, and the West gains normal suppliers of raw materials, Kalmykia, Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, who will not bring any political emphasis into their commercial trade at all. Just like Baku, Azerbaijan has normal commercial relations with the West. When there is no threat from the East, you don't have to invest in defense. There are normal contractors, trade partners who are ready to supply and, in turn, buy Western products. After the 91st and Soviet Empire collapse started, Europe has had 30 years of successful development. After the collapse of Russia, there will be 50 years of successful development. Everyone will even forget that such a Russia existed. So the collapse of Putin's Russia is beneficial to all, including Russia, and needs to be done. Otherwise, we can face chaos on your territory if we, again, thread the process carelessly and irresponsibly. Back then, in 1991, we just got lucky. Now we might not be so.
When to expect the collapse of Russia?
In a year or two, February 24th, it became a catalyst for the process. That is, Russian gangs are already claiming regional representation and power in the regions. The process is developing very quickly. The defeat on the battlefield, plus anti-Russian international sanctions. When the size of the power pie is reduced, add to it the return of Russia of a large number of people who, having no income, having no means of subsistence, but do have the experience of holding a machine gun in their hands and would gladly be spilling more blood for living, will lead to that these gangs will have a huge human replenishment resource, and then it all will spin off like a crazy flywheel. And we will need to find people who can control this, so that the regions do not enter this bloody regional war with each other. And then in 10-20 years they will have their national identity developed. They will grasp themselves as an independent state and will become the real participants in the new political structure of the world.
Ukraine.
Clear, more or less, for the Russia. What about the Ukraine? Ukraine will not only need to rebuild the country, from my point of view as a not indifferent journalist, it needs a transformation. It must be a different country. Do you agree?
And we are already a different country. That is, if we talk to our people and compare it with what happened a year ago, on the subconscious, on the social level, we are a different country, not the one that was. Is it manifested in visible, tangible signs? Well, of course. Moreover, Ukraine as a different country after the war, after our victory, should become the economical locomotive of Europe. Moreover, this locomotive is needed not only for us in Ukraine, which is quite self-explanatory why. This economical locomotive is very much needed for Europe itself. I'll explain why. The Europe we know took start after World War II, after the Marshall's Plan implementation. And the Marshall's Plan was a great engine of economic growth and development, not only for the entire European space, but also for the United States, which also rose on this after the war. We all understand that Ukraine needs a huge, enormous amount of resources to transform itself, but we must also understand that Ukraine will not technically be able to master these resources on its own. It's simply impossible. It's a question of specialization, a question of the availability of appropriate means of production, the availability of knowledge. That is, this is large number of issues. Ukraine is not able to settle this itself. This is true. And therefore, in this Marshall Plan, recovery plan, there are a large share of the participation will be provided by Western countries, Western businesses. And this again is the income of companies. These are taxes, these are salaries. And this will be an economical locomotive we are talking about here that will drive the economic growth of France, Germany, Great Britain and the United States. It will actually be an economic boom, a boom in the economies of these countries that is much needed. A recession is forecasted for this year in the Western world. And this is worth nothing again. When we do this Marshall Plan, we are not doing it all by ourselves. We must involve our partners who already are aware of this and grasp of the whole idea. We must explain it more to attract well-known economists, that is, trendsetters in the economy, who will apply their specific strategies, which they have developed in other offices, into real life here in Ukraine. Those Nobel Prize laureates with whom we are already negotiating on the matter. That is, Ukraine should become an economic locomotive and a model for development. And here comes another point. The Russian Empire will collapse. Around it, in its European part, a large number of states will be formed, which in principle is quite rich. Well, take the same Kursk, Bryansk. Potentially this is the level of the Persian Gulf countries, but which will be in such a rather shaky position. They will need support. Who will speak for them? They will address the state that has an army, that has contracts with the Western world, which can act as their lawyer, that is Ukraine. And it is quite possible that around Kiev, most likely, a sort of Black Sea region axis will be formed, where Kiev will act as a leader and will provide guarantees for the entire region. For example, the same as Poland acted for Ukraine when Poland was called Ukraine's international lawyer. And that's why everyone is interested in this to happen. Therefore, I believe that after the war, after our victory, a great future awaits Ukraine. But they said future is tied to the future of well-being, prosperity and economic growth of our Western partners. No doubt about that.
Thank you so very much. You answered even the questions that I haven't asked.
I did my best.
Thanks again. Hope to see you soon.
This way or the other, the victory will be Ukrainian. and it will be shared with the whole civilized world that helps Ukraine to achieve it. It was Henry Keane in a weekly wrap-up on UATV channel. We hope we have explained at least some of the complex things in at least in somewhat simple terms. Stay safe and tune for more.